Let's say you're in the market for an affordable grill that can do low and slow as well as some high heat stuff as well. You might just be in luck with the new Kamado Joe Kettle Joe. I know it's taken me a little bit of time to actually get this review together, but I wanted to put the grill through its paces before I went ahead and released my review. I've done a brisket, I've done a pork shoulder, I've done wings, I've done steaks. I've kind of tried to do everything that this grill claims that it can do. And let's go ahead and get into the grill. We'll go through some of the pros, some of the cons, and then what my recommendation is. Now, I will also say right off the bat, I'm not great at making follow-up videos. I tend to actually do that on Instagram. So if you want to keep up with the stuff that I'm cooking or the grills that I'm reviewing, go ahead and check out my Instagram. Let's go through the pros. Like I mentioned, I've done a brisket and a pork shoulder. So I was able to get 10 plus hours of low and slow time on the Kettle Joe. That was pretty impressive to me. I was able to get even longer if I actually used my fireboard fan, but that makes sense because towards the end, as you're running out of fuel, you need a lot more oxygen. The fan could provide that. I was able to get 13 hours using a fan, but just using the vents themselves was able to get 10 hours, no problem. I did have to overfill the firebox slightly, but 10 hours was awesome and it did it time and time again. I did a bunch of tests just using charcoal, no meat. I probably did upwards of 12 of those tests. I went through a lot of bags of lump charcoal, but I did a lot of tests because I wanted to see, can it hold temperature well, airflow, different things like that. And yes, you can get over 10 hours of low and slow time on this grill. Before I go any further, don't forget to give me a thumbs up and also subscribe if you're new here. I do all kinds of different stuff. It's not just grilling, but like tech, DIY stuff. We'd love to have you. Please subscribe. Another pro of this grill is the indirect cooking. So they make this insert that you're gonna use. It's the hyperbolic insert, and they have this plate that's gonna block all of that direct heat and give you nice indirect heat for smoking, or if you're just cooking at a higher temperature and you want that indirect heat. Really love that about this grill. Also, it's versatile. It can get screaming hot for searing. So you take the hyperbolic insert out, that's only rated to 500 degrees Fahrenheit, and then you can get that thing as hot as you want. The temperature was only reading like 500-600 degrees on the actual dome temperature itself. Opened it up to do some steaks, and it got so hot that I actually had to wear a glove with my tongs because I couldn't even get my hand close at all. So that thing was probably 800 to 900 degrees that I was searing at. Absolutely perfect for steaks. I mentioned that it's versatile, but I really like that you can get really low and close to the fire for searing. You can also move that grate up. So you've got, on a Weber, you're only gonna get like that one height. But this, I like that you had that adjustable height so you can get low and really close to the coals. You could also bank your fire to one side and then get a higher grate on the other side, maybe do some veggies, something like that. So really like that as well. Additionally, easy ash removal. So all the ash falls into this little tray in the bottom. You go ahead, open your bottom vent all the way. You can pull that tray out, dump your ash. Very easy, just like their ceramic models. So your Classic and your Big Joe, they have the same thing. The only difference is this doesn't actually have a handle on it, but you have a little ashtray that can go ahead and pull the ash out. So really easy ash removal, so thumbs up there. Also another pro, this isn't the grill specific, but just the brand, the customer service. I had a couple issues, which we'll get into in the cons, and Kamado Joe was very responsive. I got a response back by email within a day. Now, the issue is gonna take a little bit longer to resolve, but they were very responsive, and I very much appreciate that. Now, let's also talk on the pros about the brisket that I did on this Kettle Joe. I wanted to do a real life comparison between my $1,500 Big Joe 2 versus the $500 Kettle Joe. I did a brisket, did them the exact same way. So they were more of Texas style, so just salt and pepper rubs, trimmed them the same, put them on, tried to do them at the exact same temperature. So I was going about 250 degrees. The briskets came off close to the same time. The Kettle Joe was done a little bit quicker. I think it was running a little bit hotter just based on where my pit probe was. I was maybe reading a temperature that might have been a little bit lower than was actually happening in the dome. Regardless, that brisket finished a little bit faster than the Big Joe. Took them both off, rested them, did the same thing, and then I did blind taste tests to as many people as I could find. And shockingly, about 70% of the people chose the Kettle Joe brisket over the Big Joe brisket. Now, I thought that was very interesting. I'm gonna say I didn't think the Kettle Joe brisket was better. I know people voted that way. I will say it was competitive. It was very good, but I think I can say objectively that the Big Joe brisket was juicier. I know I'm going on a tangent about these briskets, but I just want to tell you what kind of things you can expect from this Kettle Joe. It makes a very good brisket. I would have given that brisket like an 8 out of 10. I think the Big Joe, I can consistently get between 7 and 10 out of 10, but it did a great job. I wasn't using a water pan. I wasn't doing anything like that. I just overfilled the firebox with charcoal, got it going, threw the brisket on, let it get up to the stall. I wrapped it in butcher paper and let it finish, and it made an awesome, awesome brisket. I'll say Big Joe 2, a little bit more juicy because as I was vacuum sealing leftovers, I was getting much more juice on the flat specifically out of the Big Joe 2 versus the Kettle Joe. But when they were fresh, they were both awesome, super tender, great smoke ring. That hyperbolic insert does a great job. Got a great smoke ring on the Kettle Joe brisket. Really excellent job. So let me elaborate a little bit on the flexibility of this cooking system. So the Kettle Joe is very unique in the kettle grill space because it is essentially adjustable in height. The top lid can rise up and you can put a hyperbolic insert into the grill for low and slow smoking or anything under 500 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the same technology that Kamado Joe uses in their ceramic cookers, and I will say I have used it on my Big Joe, and it does produce a great smoke ring. I mean, beautiful smoke ring. So you can see in the images here on this brisket and stuff, just awesome smoke ring, awesome product that comes off of it. It does also help a little bit with heat dispersion as well, so you're gonna get a more even temperature on your meat, not gonna get hot spots as much because of the hyperbolic insert. So that is very unique to this product, and I greatly appreciate Kamado Joe really pushing the envelope and competing with all these other companies because you and I, the consumer, we get to win. We sit back, they duke it out, and they're making awesome products that we get to use. So I love seeing this innovation in this space, specifically in the kettle game, also using the ceramic in the bottom to help hold temperature. My background comes from doing briskets in a Weber kettle grill. I mean, that thing didn't really hold heat much at all, and that's how I was doing brisket. So to see this in a kettle really does make me happy because that's kind of like my background and where I started out. So I think that is great that Kamado Joe is doing this type of thing. Another pro is that the Kettle Joe stand is rock solid. It's really a great stand. Really well made, good wheels. The wheels lock in place so it's not gonna move and roll around on you. I have other grills and they're kind of like rinky-dink to roll around. This thing is solid. They did an excellent job with that. And the last pro is you can really cook almost anything on this grill because it's versatile, because you've got direct heat, you've got indirect heat, you've got low and slow, and you've got really high temperatures as well. Those are some really great things about this Kettle Joe. I like that you've got ceramic in the bottom that helps hold that heat. It's kind of a heat capacitor. That's what's a major draw in the larger Kamado Joes, the ceramic ones, your Big Green Eggs, things like that. Those Kamado cookers, they're ceramic and they hold in so much heat and they don't go through a lot of fuel. Well, they're trying to give you a little bit of that by putting these ceramic firebox in the bottom of this Kettle Joe. So you've got the metal, the thin metal that doesn't hold heat very well, but you got those ceramic inserts in the bottom that are gonna hold in a little bit of heat. And like I said, you can get at least 10 hours at low and slow temperatures. Now, it isn't all sunshines, rainbows, and unicorns. There are some cons about this grill. The first, and this one's relatively minor, is gonna be the assembly. I'm very handy, and it took me about an hour. Granted, I was also doing it on a live stream, so I might've been nervous or something like that, but it was a little bit tedious, but not that big of a deal, but I just did want to mention it just so that you know it is pretty intensive for the assembly and takes about an hour. Now, by far the biggest con to me was temperature control. I mentioned that you can get 10+ hours on a cook, and that is absolutely true. But stock, as I had my Kettle Joe set up, the temperature control was very challenging. I read the manual, I did exactly what they said, and I was struggling to hold temperature. I didn't know if it was the wind, I couldn't tell, and then after some research, I realized that my hyperbolic insert was a little bit warped. Now, Kamado Joe is gonna replace that, and they couldn't give me a time frame of when that replacement was gonna come, and I was like, well, I can't just wait around forever to do this review. So I'm just telling you my experience. I do not know if other grills have had the same issue, but I had to use a felt gasket. I could not get good temperature control. This kind of proves it right here. When I had the grill set up without the felt gaskets and I was ready to shut it down, I would close up all the vents and I could not get the fire to actually go out. That's how much air was leaking in. It would drop down to about 200 degrees Fahrenheit and then just hold there and burn through all of the fuel. Now, hopefully everyone is not having this issue. I went ahead, I bought a felt gasket. It was only like $12 or $15, so it's really not that big of a deal. And it made a huge difference. Sealed up the hyperbolic insert, and I sealed up the lid as well. And now it was much, much better at holding temperature. But unfortunately, I can't say if every Kettle Joe can hold temperature or you'll have to add felt to every single one. I'm not sure. I think I might err on the side of caution. Just go ahead, spend the 15 bucks, get yourself some felt, and just go ahead and add it because it really seals that thing up really well. I know I mentioned the ashtray as a pro. It's also a con, unfortunately. That thing is very dinky. I was pushing the ashtray back in and the piece that you grab bends inward very easily. That was kind of unfortunate. The ashtrays on the ceramic cookers are very sturdy, really well made. This one was like very thin metal, and pulling it out, no problem. Pushing it back in gave me a little bit of issues, and it was very flimsy. I don't know how that happened. Another con, in my experience, were the side tables. You can kind of tell, and I even mentioned this in the live stream when I was assembling it. I was like, oh man, these side tables, they are nice, they're convenient. I love having that space to put things, but I would not put a lot of weight. I went ahead and put a brisket on a cutting board, and it actually bent one of the side tables. Granted, it was a huge brisket. The brisket was like 15 pounds, I think, but that was a con. I wanted them to be more sturdy, especially because you're selling this thing as, you know, a smoker, and tons of people are gonna bring a brisket outside and put it on this thing. That seems very common, and I was a little disappointed that the shelf bent so easily. Another con is the distance between the heat deflector and the grilling grate surface when you have the hyperbolic insert in. I was a little disappointed. It's not much space at all. And they don't tell you in the manual anything about needing a drip pan. You're absolutely, on a low and slow cook, if it's really fatty, you're gonna have to have a drip pan, and there's not a lot of space there. So I'll put a link in the description, but I went ahead and got essentially a pizza pan, a small pizza pan that I put on top of the heat deflector to catch as much grease as I possibly could. It worked great, but I wish there was a little bit more space, especially if people are really into like using water, if you want to put water in there, something like that. There's just not a lot of space. What's crazy is there's plenty of space underneath the hyperbolic insert. You actually have a lot of space between the charcoal in the firebox and the heat deflector, but above the heat deflector, you've only got a couple inches between that and the grates themselves. So you're gonna need a really low profile drip pan. Another con is that it seems that some of the traditional Kamado Joe accessories will not work on the Kettle Joe. So mainly I'm looking at the Jotisserie and the Dojo, those things that are like very pricey. I would have loved to have seen those actually work on the Kettle Joe, because what if one day, let's say you started with the Kettle Joe at 500 bucks and then you want to upgrade, you know, it would be great to have these accessories be able to work on both. Now, I have seen that some of the other accessories do work. So like the cast iron, the half moon, and the soapstone and things like that do seem to actually fit this grill, but I would have loved to have seen a way for them to get the Jotisserie or the Dojo to work. Another con would actually be the side table height. So I know I talked about how the side tables are a little bit flimsy and the height is a little bit low. Now I don't know if I'm focusing on that because I've compared it side by side with my Big Joe, and the side tables are higher and like just easier on your back. You're not leaning over as much. I understand that this is the size that the grill is, and so they might be limited by that, but it is a little bit low. So there you have it. Those are my cons. And the 2 upgrades that I did were the felt gasket, which I highly recommend, and then that pizza pan for drippings. Absolutely. I think you should just go ahead and get both of those. But like I said, once I was there, I got an awesome brisket, great pork shoulder. The wings were great. The searing temperature for the steaks was absolutely perfect. So those things were great. I do think it's a good grill. I'm not exactly sure why they created it at $500. Well, there you have it. You've seen my pros, you've seen my cons. I can't say if you should go out and get this grill or not, but I will give you one piece of advice. I do think it's a good grill. I think it's a decent product. $500 is a little bit high, I believe. One thing that I would encourage you to look into, and this is not gonna last for much longer. Kamado Joe is now on their 3rd iteration of their ceramic grills. So they make a Classic 3 and a Big Joe 3. I own the Big Joe 2. You can actually find still on the market their version 1s of both of those grills. The Classic 1, Lowe's at times has sold it for $750. That is something that I would consider. If you're looking at the Kettle Joe, check Lowe's, see if they have a Classic 1 in stock in your area. They're not gonna be around forever. They probably will only be around for a few more months. Kamado Joe's not making them anymore, but it's definitely something to consider that would get you into the ceramic game. You're gonna get much longer cooks on that thing, and it's only $250 more than this kettle. Give that a chance before you settle on the kettle. If it doesn't exist anymore and they're totally out of stock, go ahead, get your kettle, but take a look at that. I think that is something that would serve you well. As always, don't forget to thumbs me up, but the most important thing that you can do is actually share this video. The YouTube algorithm loves that. Thanks again for watching, and we will see you next time.